Hello students, my name is Jai Hanuman. I am a faculty from KLE Society's SA Manvi Law College, Gadag. I have been teaching law from last 12 years. Today's session is the first session in the Constitutional Law lecture series which I am going to render here afterwards, and this is based on the syllabus prescribed by the Karnataka State Law University, Navanagar, Hubballi. So this is the brief introduction, and in today's sessions we will be discussing about the meaning of constitution as such. So the plan is, so we'll be studying the meaning of constitution under two heads. One is the etymology of this term constitution. Second one, the meaning given to this term constitution in the Black's Law Dictionary. You may ask a question as to why Black's Law Dictionary. Black's Law Dictionary is considered as the gold standard for the language of law. The dictionary has been considered as an authoritative publication to get the meaning of many complex terms which are being used in the field of law. It has been widely used throughout the world. So therefore, we will be looking into the meaning given to this term constitution in this Black's Law Dictionary and try to understand it. And before that, we will be looking into the etymology of the term constitution as to how it was derived, what is the foundation or the roots from which the term constitution has emerged. So that is the plan. So let us start the first part, that is etymology of the word constitution. The term constitution is derived from the Latin words constitutus on the one hand. The second part is not actually a word, it's a suffix, that is ion. So what do you mean by this term constitutus in Latin and what this suffix ion represents? Let us see. The constitutus is, it means or it implies the establishing, creating, making, bringing into existence. This is the sense in which the word constitutus is being used in Latin. Similarly, the suffix ion, it represents an act or an action. So together, the act of establishing or bringing into existence something, that is what the term constitution represents. So constitution represents establishing something, an act of establishing something. So in the current context in which we will be discussing under the constitution lectures, the term constitution represents or it implies an entity, a document, or an institution which brings constitution into existence. So what constitution actually creates, what it constitutes, technically and legally speaking, constitution is an entity or an institution which bring constitution into existence. That is the sense in which we understand this term constitution legally. So this is with respect to the etymology of this term constitution. Next comes the meaning of constitution as defined or as given in the Black's Law Dictionary. If you go through this meaning which is displayed on the screen, you will realize there are few essential components or few important things which are described or for which provisions are made in an institution or an entity or what we say a document. So that document, entity or institution is going to be considered as constitution. So what will be there in this entity or institution is, it is considered as a fundamental law of a nation or a state. That is a important thing which we should know about constitution. What constitution is? Constitution is a fundamental law of a nation or a state. What do you mean by this term fundamental? Fundamental means literally it means the base, the foundation or the basic things on which something is built. Similarly, the nation is built or technically the legal system which has been built in a nation or the very nation is being built on the foundation of this law, what we call as constitution. So constitution is the fundamental law. That is the law on which all other laws are based. We find numerous laws of different from different sources which we follow, which are binding on us, which regulate the way in which we are going to conduct ourselves. Ultimately, all those rules, regulations, laws, bylaws, they find their roots and they find their foundations in one important document or in one important institution, legal institution, that is called as constitution of a nation. Every nation has to have constitution. Every nation used to have constitution, and every nation is going to have constitution in the future. You cannot perceive or you cannot understand the concept of state or nation without a constitution. Some form of constitution has to be there to say that there is a nation. So what that constitution is, it is a fundamental law of a nation or a state. At the outset, I would like to give you one clarification regarding the terms nation and state. Even though in our ordinary usage, in our day-to-day life, we use them in different senses. The moment we talk about state, we generally talk about the constituent units of a nation. Take, for example, in India, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh. These are all generally called as states, and India is considered as a nation. But in our present discussion, we use this term state as synonym with the term of nation. So whenever if I am using the word state, unless the context otherwise requires, state means what I am speaking is about the nation. So what is this constitution? Constitution is the fundamental law of a nation or a state. The foundation, the basic law on which everything else is based, or everything is built on this. All other rules and regulations and laws have their roots in constitution. Therefore the Black's Law Dictionary considers constitution as the fundamental law of a nation or a state. Moving further is in what form it has to be. Should it always be in writing? So there should be a document to say that yes, this is the constitution? Not at all necessary. Constitution can be written or unwritten. And one of the most popular illustration for an unwritten constitution is none other than the Constitution of United Kingdom. Even today, United Kingdom's constitution is unwritten. And we find, if you go to the history, whichever nation you take, whichever nation you mention, most of those nations earlier, they used to have an unwritten constitution. So constitution need not be a document, need not be in writing. It may be in writing or it may not be in writing. It may be based on few accepted standards or principles or customs which might be followed as if it is a constitutional principle. That's okay. So it is a fundamental law of a nation or a state which may be written or unwritten. So what this constitution is going to do, the most important thing to be done by the constitution is establishing what we call as the character and conception of its government. What kind of a government it should have? What are going to be the important characteristic features of such government is something which is going to be stated by the constitution. Whether we should have a presidential form of government or we should have a democratic or parliamentary form of government. Should we have democracy or we should have dictatorship? Should we have a rule of a king, monarchical government? What kind of a government we should have? That is the conception of the government which a nation should have. Something which we can find in the constitution. Conception. The characters. Further, okay, you have decided a kind of government. What are the other detailed characteristic features of a government? In this regard, we can find the provisions or details can be found in a document or an entity or an institution, as you may call, that is constitution. So it establishes the character and conception of a government of a nation. Moving further, it lays down the basic principles which are going to guide or which are going to be followed or which are going to which are going to imply or that is the way in which That is the basic principles in accordance with which the internal life of the nation should conform with. How the society as such, which is in a nation, should live. Whether it should be theocratic society, where utmost importance is being given to the religion and religious beliefs. So saying that if you are not following a particular religion, you may not find a place here, or even if you work here, you may not get most of the freedoms. That's maybe the way in which constitution might have laid down the rules. Some other constitution may be very liberal. They may say that we state will not interfere in the religious affairs of the people. They can follow whichever religion they want. Or a constitution may provide for a society where there is no scope or place for religion. Not only that, other social relationship, how it is to be. The constitution may not be giving all minute details about the internal life of a nation, but it lays down few basic principles which are to be complied with. Our life, the internal life of a nation, should be in conformity with those basic principles. Where we find those basic principles? Again, we find those basic principles in the constitution of a nation. Moving further, it is going to organize the government. Constitution is also is it also did one more important. It also is going to do one more important thing, that is it organizes the government. You decided the government is to be of such a kind, how it has to be organized. Let us say, what is the tenure of a government, who are to be there in the government, what are the qualifications for a person to be part of the government, how to select it or elect it. All these basic details as to the organization of the government, for this details can be found in the constitution itself. So a constitution is going to have provisions dealing with organizing the government. What else it is going to do with the government is that it is going to regulate, distribute, and limit the functions and powers which can be exercised by different departments of the government. Government is going to function through different departments. At the helm of the affairs, we find the president, prime minister, his council of ministers. They will be at the helm of the affairs. Whereas the other departments of the government, what we say the bureaucracy and the government servants, they are going to function as per the policies or decisions which are going to be taken by the executive or the people who are at the helm of the affairs. So what kind of functions and powers they have, distribution of the power, and regulating that power, how they have to exercise those powers, and how they should discharge their functions. Guidelines or rules and regulations are going to be prescribed by the constitution, and also constitution prescribes the limit, what government departments can do, what the government can do, what government cannot do. Even in this regard, we can find a lot of provisions in the document, or what we say institution, or the entity which we call it as constitution. Finally, the most important thing which the constitution is going to do is prescribing the extent and manner in which sovereign powers of a nation is going to be exercised. I hope you know the concept of sovereignty. Sovereignty means freedom from external influence or dominance. If I say there is a nation is a sovereign nation, that means that externally it is free from others. No one can dictate the terms, or no one can impose their will and wish on the decisions are to be taken by a nation. Let us take the example of India. Before independence, India was not considered as a sovereign state, because ultimately India's decision, what India has to do, was something decided in England. But once we got independence, now we were a sovereign country. No other nation, no other body, external body can dictate terms as to what India should do, what India should not do. Should we recognize a particular state or not to give recognition to a state? Should we have a cordial relationship with other nations, or what kind of relationship we should have? Should we recognize Taliban regime now in Afghanistan? Should we extend a formal recognition to Taiwan? No other nation, irrespective of the power of other nations, irrespective of the ability of other nations, irrespective of their influence at the international level, no other country can dictate terms to India saying that you have to recognize Taiwan or you should not recognize Taiwan, you recognize Taliban, you don't recognize Taliban. No. Others cannot dictate terms to us. Our nation is going to take decisions as per its own will and wish. That represents sovereign power, supreme power. Similarly, internally, what has to be done? What kind of law has to be enacted? How those laws are to be implemented? When those laws are to be implemented? When laws are to be changed? What needs to be repealed? What kind of policy to be followed? These are the sovereign powers which are going to be exercised in different nations differently. Whereas what we can find in the constitutions lays down the rules as to the extent and manner in which this sovereign power of a state or a nation can be exercised. In some state, king will be the person who will have ultimate authority over everything. That is the constitution of that nation. Whatever king says, that is going to be a law. If he says something is white, even though it is black, we have to accept. That's how the constitution is. But in democratic countries, we may have a lot of limitations and restrictions on the powers of the sovereign authority. So, where we find these rules and regulations which deal with the extent and manner in which the sovereign power has to be exercised, we can find detailed rules and regulations in this regard in the Constitution. So, these are the important things for which provisions can be found in the in a document or an entity or an institution which we call as constitution. To sum up, so whenever we are talking about meaning of constitution, so these are two things which we should know. One is etymologically, what does it mean? Constitution is an act of establishing or bringing to existence what? In our context, the nation itself, a state, a government, its administration, the whole system was brought into existence by an institution called constitution. That is the sense in which etymologically the term constitution is being used. It is derived from Latin term and it represents establishing or bringing into existence, that is the constitution. So that is the etymology. As far as the meaning given in the Black's Law Dictionary, as we notice, there are few important things for which provisions can be found in the Constitution, which includes it is being considered as a fundamental law of the land. It may be written or unwritten, and it is going to establish conception and characters of a government of a nation. What kind of government we should have, and it also lays down the basic principles as to internal life, how the people should lead their life inside the nation. Further, it organizes the government, distributes the power, functions of the different departments of the government, and most importantly, it lays down the rules and regulations as to the manner and extent to which the sovereign power has to be exercised. A document which is going to have a document, as I said, it need not be a document. Even an unwritten constitution can be there. A document, an entity, or an institution which makes provisions for these, we generally call it as the constitution of a nation. It is the fundamental law of a nation. So with this, let us conclude this session, and in the next session we will be discussing about different kinds of constitutions which we find around the world. This will conclude. Thanks to one and all.